Hi, I'm Ty. I teach fifth grade ELA and social studies in Jacksonville, Florida.
I'm Emma, and I teach third and fourth grade in San Antonio, Texas.
I'm Kayleigh, and I teach fourth grade in Minneapolis.
And I'm Bella, and I teach second grade in Sacramento.
Today, we are going to be talking about how you can build effective teacher-student relationships and why it's important to do so in your classroom. So first, we just want to give a little bit of a framework of what an effective student-teacher relationship looks like and what goes into that. There are 5 different components that, 5 different dimensions of what goes into an effective student-teacher relationship. These 5 dimensions are perception of satisfaction, cohesiveness, difficulty of task, competitiveness with others, and friction. These 5 dimensions are things that you want in varying levels in your classroom. So perception of satisfaction and cohesiveness, you want those to be highly present in your classroom because you want your students to feel that they're satisfied with the classroom experience that they are getting, and you want them to feel that they belong and like they get along with their classmates. So that's that cohesiveness piece. You want moderate difficulty of task that connects to wanting to find your students' zone of proximal development. You want the tasks that you give them to be challenging enough that they are pushing themselves and that they're learning, but not overly challenging so that they shut down and their self-efficacy drops and they just get very anxious and angry in your classroom. You want to find that sweet spot. And then you want low competitiveness with others and friction. You don't want students to feel like they're fighting against each other. After those dimensions, we have 3 components of a working alliance. A working alliance is something that was originally talked about more in a corporate workplace and then was later applied to a classroom because it's the idea that you want a professional but collaborative and positive relationship with your students. There are 3 components of a working alliance: bond, task, and goal. Bond means you want an emotional component. You want there to be mutual liking and trust and respect in the relationship with your students. Task is the idea that you want the teacher and the student to agree on what's being done and why it is being done. And then goal is the idea that when your students set a goal, you don't want them to think that they are alone in reaching that goal. You want the student to realize that the student and the teacher are working together to solve that goal, and that's going to help students perceive that the teacher is a positive influence in their life and that there's a strong relationship between the student and the teacher.
Now I'll be talking a little bit about the academic benefits of positive teacher-student relationships in the classroom. So the first point that I want to make is that students are more highly motivated to engage in school when they feel that they have a high-quality relationship with their teacher. Some studies have shown that students are more engaged academically in elementary school classrooms in which teachers effectively form healthy relationships with students within a strong classroom community in the early days of school. And there has been further research showing that this heightened engagement does actually lead to higher academic achievement in elementary school students. Something I thought was interesting to note is that teacher-student relationships had stronger effects on both engagement and achievement in upper elementary years than in lower elementary years. And additionally, the negative academic effects of having a bad relationship with a teacher are stronger in primary school than in secondary school. So it is very important for us elementary school teachers to be aware of our relationship with our students in order to make sure that we're interacting with them in a way that motivates them and benefits them academically.
So while quality relationships do have academic benefits, they also impact students' social functioning and their sense of belonging. So teachers have the influence to promote and, most importantly, model for their students how to practice things such as social acceptance, how to be warm and caring, just how to be a good friend. So overall, they really have a significant role in just the development of a student's social and emotional skills. So when students feel like their classroom is a safe place and that it's centered on mutual respect, they develop a sense of belonging, which, as mentioned before, leads to greater engagement and academic performance. And it shows that, research shows that when students feel greater connection to their teacher and they feel like they belong, they're more inclined to feel connected to their school community. And so when they have this sense of belonging in their schools, they're more likely to buy into the school's philosophy and just learn how to be good members of the community, which is such an important life skill. Also, teachers who students trust can play a big role when students are experiencing difficult transitions in their lives. For example, teachers can be useful in helping students navigate peer interactions or navigate difficult life transitions, such as going into middle school.
One of the most important components of building a positive relationship with students is providing social emotional support. Social emotional support are behaviors that leave our students feeling like they are cared for and supported in many aspects of their life. This particularly looks like being able to assist students' emotional and social needs. Teachers' social emotional support for their adolescent students is related to several positive outcomes for students. This consists of supporting students emotionally, leading to higher classroom engagement. When your students are supported emotionally, they're more likely to want to engage in the lesson, listen closer, and cooperate with their peers and you. There's also an increased mathematics interest. Studies have shown that students feel like their relationship with their math teachers are a lot less close due to feeling like their teachers don't care for them as much. So it is very important to build those emotional relationships early on so that they have closer relationships with their mathematics teachers. There's also a willingness to seek out help from the teacher. When you provide that emotional support, your students will feel a lot more comfortable voicing their struggles and come to you for other things that they may need. Lastly, academic self-efficacy. When students are feeling supported emotionally, they will feel a lot more confident with their self and feel like they can advocate for their own work and push through challenging tasks. Research has also shown that when emotional support is present in the early years, students are more likely to cope with middle school and there will be fewer conflicts moving forward.
So now we're going to share a little bit about practical applications, things that you can establish in the first weeks of school or later on to foster these positive teacher-student relationships. So we're going to go through each of our grade levels. We have a second grade, a third grade, fourth grade, and fifth grade teacher. And we're going to talk about the practices that we used in our classrooms that were effective and how they were used to build these strong relationships. So in second grade, a way that you can establish strong relationships with your students is making your classroom more student-centered. So that means changing your instructional practices to be more focused or involving students in your instructional practices. So it's not always just the teacher doing all the teaching. So this means giving students the opportunity to share their knowledge with their class. And so when you give students opportunities to share their interests, they see that their teacher believes that they are capable and that they're valued members of the learning community. So for example, something you can do is maybe just 5 minutes every week, just have like a different student teach something to the class. So for example, in the picture here, I have one of my students who is a hula dancer. She goes to hula classes, and here she did a little 5-minute hula dancing lesson for the rest of the class. Other examples include I had one student who could speak Japanese, and she taught us all of the numbers in Japanese, which is quite fun. Another thing you can do is just encourage collaboration in the classroom. As teachers, we have the opportunity to teach our students how to get along or just how to work in a group. So for example, you can have students in learning clubs, which is like table groups, or you can have lots of group projects as well. And then another practice that you can start in the first week of school is just establishing a morning meeting. And so during morning meeting, you can devote time to prayer and non-academic sharing and conversations. So this is a great time where my students got to know me and I got to know them. During that time, I could share with them about my faith life, and we could talk about things that don't have to do with school. And I think that was a really important part of establishing the strong relationship that we had.
So I actually taught 3rd and 4th grade this past year, but for the purpose of this presentation, I'll be focusing on suggestions for a 3rd grade classroom. Now, I was warned by 2nd year teachers last summer that their biggest regret was trying to be too strict and kind of too emotionally removed from their students at the start of the year. And I know this is tempting for me and for other 1st year teachers who are afraid of not having control over their classrooms from the start. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't still be firm and have high expectations for your students, because you definitely should. But showing your kids that you're a real person with emotions is super important too in building a relationship with them. And this actually serves to help with classroom management as the year goes on rather than hinder it, because your kids know you well and they trust you and they know that you have their best interest at heart. So one way that I did this last year was by opening my first day of school by reading a book titled The Girl Who Never Made Mistakes, and it's pictured up there on the screen. This book is about a little girl who was used to doing everything perfectly. One day she makes her first mistake, and after that she is so afraid of making mistakes that she kind of stops trying to do anything at all. And by the end of the book, what she learns is that making mistakes are just a part of life, and you don't have to worry about doing everything perfectly all the time. I thought that this lined up really well with 3rd and 4th grade, because they're right at that age where they're becoming more self-aware and worried about how their actions will impact their relationship with other people, other students, and their teacher. So while discussing this book, I shared with my kids that I was nervous about making a mistake in my first year of teaching, but I knew that everyone in our classroom would make mistakes sometimes throughout the year, and that mistakes are what help us to learn and grow. Some emotional benefits of this were that my kids felt like they could relate to me right away. They were nervous to have a new teacher on the first day of school, just like I was nervous to start a new job. And some of them later told me that our first day made them feel like I would love them just the way they are, and they didn't have to worry about getting in trouble for making a mistake. Some comments that I got from students throughout the year was that they felt safe with me, they were happier at school than at home, and they felt like they could be completely themselves in our classroom. In terms of academic benefits, something I didn't realize at the time, but later learned in my psychology class last spring, that you'll be taking this upcoming spring, was that this was setting my class up for a mastery-oriented goal structure. This means kind of reinforcing the idea that school is about personal growth and not about who can perform the best when compared with others. So when a classroom is geared toward mastery, students tend to be more motivated and engaged, and they do better academically. And I definitely saw this in my kids. So by building a relationship with your students that allows them to see you as a caring person who wants to help them learn and grow and who wants to learn with them, you are not only helping them to feel secure and comfortable being themselves at school, but you're also setting up your class structure in a way that promotes high academic motivation and achievement.
So by 4th grade, they're getting a little bit older. So there are a few things that you can do that maybe wouldn't be as applicable in a 2nd or 3rd grade classroom. And one such strategy that I used was a form of letter writing. I actually stole this idea from a book, which you'll see in the center of this screen. The book is called I Wish My Teacher Knew. And if you haven't read it yet, I think it should be pretty much required that you read it before you start this year, because this book was absolutely essential to me kind of setting up my classroom community this year. The premise of the book is a teacher who gave her students a piece of paper that just said, I wish my teacher knew ... and asked her students to fill in the sentence. And she taught elementary students and was expecting to get things like, I wish my teacher knew I really like chocolate. Like, she thought it was just going to be these funny little things that her students came up with. And she ended up learning so much about her students' family lives and school preferences and social lives that she shared this activity and it went viral. And then she wrote a book. And so here I am promoting it to all of you. So on the left of this screen, you'll see a piece of paper that says, I wish Miss Purcell knew that. And I had these pieces of paper on a shelf in my classroom all year with a little mailbox, and my students could walk over and write me a note whenever they wanted to. So in that purple box on the right, you see examples of letters that I got from my students. And each of these letters kind of helped me connect with my students in either an emotional, social, or academic way that maybe I wouldn't have been able to without this process in my classroom. So I'm usually sad on Mondays because I don't like spending the whole weekend at home. That clues me into the emotional aspect of this student. That let me know, okay, that's why you're acting how you're acting on Mondays. That's something we can talk about. What is home like? Why do you not like spending the whole weekend at home? That was a good entry point for me to emotionally get to know this student and better serve that student throughout the year, knowing that information. My best friend is Batanya. Great, cool. Thank you for letting me know that. When it's playtime, I'll make sure you're by Batanya. When it's class time, I will probably make sure you and Batanya are not next to each other to foster better attention. But that's helpful for me to know. Something as silly as that, that note was super helpful to get because that explains kind of the social dynamics in my classroom. I hate math because I'm a lot better at writing. Okay, that gives me an idea immediately during class of what's an interest for this student, what's a struggle for this student, how can I use writing to help this student in math class. So just the way that these letters really allowed me to see an emotional, social, and academic side to my students that maybe I probably would have stumbled across eventually, but I was getting all these letters flooding my little mailbox in the first week or two. So I felt like I knew my students as full people, not just as students, so much faster than I probably would have. And these letters were a big reason for that. So especially if you have older kids who are comfortable with reading and writing and kind of expressing themselves that way, this is a practice that I would highly recommend.
One of the most important ways that I built a positive student-teacher relationship with my students is by showing them that I care and saw them as their individual selves rather than grouping them as one class. Every morning before my students would enter our classroom, each student had their own individual handshake that I made up with them. I memorized every 10-second handshake and greeted them with a smile. And then following an epic greeting, I would do a check-in during the beginning of the week, asking my students how their weekends were and how they were feeling. I did not always get a positive response, but I would acknowledge my students' feelings and remind them that their feelings are valid and that I struggle with Mondays as well. So I kind of relate to what Kayleigh said. Going off of that, I created a space in my classroom that allowed my students to be vulnerable with me. I was vulnerable with them and showing them that I make mistakes. For an example, in the beginning of the year, I told my students that I kind of have like a speech problem. So like I stutter over my words and I immediately asked for forgiveness. And because of that, my students felt like they could be vulnerable with me as well, excuse me. Some other ways that I was able to build a positive relationship with my students is participating in things that they enjoy. I would do things that most students wouldn't even, or most teachers, excuse me, would even think about doing. Like for an example, showing up to their soccer practices or attending their basketball games. And here I actually have a video linked of me realizing that my girls, my fifth grade girls, they love dancing, and knowing that I like dancing, I decided to teach them a step. And so here's the video.
We're going to really hope and pray that this works, and it's really cool. So definitely don't click by this.
I just want to say they are amazing and thank you for watching that. Lastly, autonomy. That is super huge in the fifth grade. They're kind of at that age where they're like, oh, we're middle schoolers, we're too cool for school. And I noticed that they were very peer oriented. So one way that I really got them hooked into academics is making sure that they had a voice in the classroom. So instead of just like doing a standard presentation with my students, I let them do a gallery walk. And it was very cool to see my students walk around the classroom and showcase their work in a way that they got to choose the way that they wanted to do. Other ways that I promoted autonomy was allowing my students to choose where they wanted to independent read. They could choose a quiet place in the classroom, or if we were feeling really adventurous, we would go outside into the playground and allow them to read outside because they don't have recess anymore. And so autonomy in academics is very important because it allows students to control the classroom. And once you realize that the classroom is a space for everyone, instead of using words like it's my classroom, you realize that it just becomes a better space and your students respect you a lot more. And here are our sources.
Thank you so much for watching.
Thank you.